Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever in the world you happen to be. This is Crow, and we're going to do an FTL tier list today. Now, I did one of these about a year and a half ago live on my stream, and didn't bother to save the VOD. So I wish to rectify that error. So in discussing the ranks of ships in FTL, I think it's important not to just kind of throw some ships up and then say like this is a good, this is a bad, but have an idea on what criteria one is judging ships by. It's very easy to have personal bias infect the choices that we make because we like to ship a couple runs, it did really well for us, and then another ship that is typically strong didn't do so well for us, or I just had a lot of good memorable runs with a particular ship versus not. And I think it's best to start off with an idea on like why ships are good or bad. To me, I think the most relevant factor in judging ships is weaknesses. And what that is assessing what flaws a ship has and how many a ship has, how egregious those flaws are. Having played FTL for 3,800 hours, 3,900 hours or so, plus watching thousands of hours of other people playing FTL, I've noted, as well as recorded, that really the early sectors are the determiners of whether you're going to win a run or not. Sectors 1 and 4 are particularly egregious in claiming ships. I would say almost half my runs that do die do so in those particular sectors or fall out from those sectors. This is all being done from the perspective of playing hard mode with pause. No pause players may rank ships that require a lot more microing, such as Slug B or Zoltan C lower. But it's when the reason Sector 1 is so tough is because those weaknesses that your ship has are easy to exploit and difficult to fix. You don't have a lot of scrap, you have a lot of other things that are going on, you have a bunch of priorities in mind in those early sectors, depending on, again, the ship types. The strongest ships have very few priorities. It's just like, okay, I'm just going to upgrade my shields, and then I'm going to run that until I hit, Sector 3 when I start seeing 2 shielded enemies regularly. And then on the flip side, ships that have a lot of weaknesses, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to have to get shields, but then I'm also going to have to find weapons, or maybe I'm going to need some crew, or I'm going to need some solution to dealing with these threats. And Sector 4 is also an issue sector because it jumps to 3 shielded ships. So essentially, it's Sector 1 is 1 shield, Sector 2 is 1 shield, though you can find a couple event ships having 2 shields. Or this one's Slug Pirate Surveyor ship. Sector 3 is when you start seeing 2 shielded ships pretty regularly, and most weapon ships or ships in general do have a way to bypass 2 shields. And then Sector 3, or Sector 4, they do jump up to 3 shielded ships. And so that's a pretty steep curve as far as keeping your offense relevant. And it's very easy for ships to fall behind on that curve, particularly if they have weak starting weapons, or they're just weak on systems, or they're just taking too much damage. So that's generally the biggest thing in terms of, like I said, determining whether a ship is, good or not. The other thing is, what are the ship's strengths? Some ships do some things very well, and it can kind of overlook their weaknesses. So a ship might be a little bit light on crew, but because they have a door system, it's less of an issue. And vice versa, and the other things is because the ship has a certain number of systems, or maybe has some blue options or better, stronger weapons, it makes getting over bad RNG easier. And a lot of FTL really is just mitigating the bad RNG. Now, I play as a win streaker, which means I'm attempting to win absolutely every single run I get when I hit that start button. So it shifts the perspective of not taking risks of like in early sectors because, well, you just start the run over again if you lose key crew or you risk taking a lot of damage. Something along those lines, because you're judging it on that you haven't lost a lot of time, where I look at it that I'm again attempting to make sure I get victory with every single one, and sometimes it means not taking fights that are risky or doing things differently. And there are a lot of things you can do in an FTL run that, you know, 10% of the time, 5% of the time, 1% of the time don't get you killed, and you can just run that and be fine with it. That's something I typically try to avoid, that I don't want to have those kind of events occurring to me, and so I just try to 100% win 100% of the runs that I'm playing. And then finally, just sort of another thing you can kind of consider on ships is their ability to generate money, generate scrap. The biggest factor is generally the ability to do crew kills, since crew kills tap into a higher level of resources, or rewards, I should say. You're also more likely to get free weapons or crew while getting crew kills, and picking up a free weapon early is incredibly strong. Can save you a lot of money, and scrap in the early sector is an absolute premium. It is when scrap is the most valuable. It's just trying to get that run going, trying to get the run, off the floor. Other things that can help do that is like long-range scanners can find money for you because you're gonna hit a lot of fights. Cloaking could be that. Cloaking does enable the player to potentially dive early on in the games. It's risky, but it's a strong system. Plus, it's also a system you generally want to have, and at 150 scrap, it's the most expensive system you can buy. And then there's blue options. It's just worth noting or worth considering that ships have some blue options, but generally I'm not the biggest fan of blue options. I think they're essentially overrated. You'll see people buy crew because, I'll get blue options from this rock or this Engi. They typically don't pay for themselves, and there's just more valuable things that I wish to invest my scrap with. And we're going to be a little bit free-flowy here while we get her through the actual rankings. Things might move if I change my mind. It happens generally when I'm putting together these lists. I have like where I'm going to put ships, and then I sort of like convince myself elsewise. So a lot of this is fluid, but a lot of more of this is just like in certain areas. Like they're just tiers versus their ranks within a given tier. So I figure most people should really group ships sort of similar, and they'd be like, well, here's one instances on why I think this ship is better than this ship in this particular category or ranking. Boarding ships tend to be more difficult to grade. There are two particular ships, or two or three ships that come to mind, that are notorious for snowballing. So like they can have really terrible sector ones, but then easily be in a position to essentially beat the flagship in sectors 3. Again, because I am trying to win every run, the fact that it is able to easily win runs is not as relevant of a choice. And why is letter D down here? Whoop. And determining how good of a ship is. Now, I guess the last thing I want to say is I'm not the greatest FTL player in the world. There's preferences that individuals have. There's the amount of time one can dedicate to playing FTL. So, if you're able to min-max every single fight that you can possibly can, you might come up with different selections for what ships you think are good or bad. Anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And we'll start with the first ship. It's the Kestrel A. The Kestrel A I put in A tier. All right. It's interesting that the first ship that you get is so incredibly strong, but it has two things predominantly going for it, and that is that it has a burst laser 2, the best purchasable weapon in the game, as well as an Artemis missile, the best missile weapon in the game. Both are highly efficient, And the fact that you can take 2 damage to your weapon system and still potentially deal 2 damage to an opposing weapon system or whatever is a threat to you is really nice. Now, the ship itself doesn't have weaknesses per se. The layout's pretty alright. Can't create vent in the front portion of the ship here. You have 3 human crews who aren't good at anything, but they're not bad at anything, so they can hold their own against boarders to some degree. They also can fix systems at the pace you would generally expect, and the ship layout at least allows you to move back and forth throughout the ship without too much problem. But yeah, the biggest threats early on in FTL are generally like hazard events are really disgusting, particularly if they're against ships with drone control or ships with Zoltan shields. And the only other event that kind of comes to mind that's gross are the shield hacking event that can happen in early sectors, or civilian sectors, I should say. And like I said, the Kestrel has a lot of strengths in that regard because it can take down a Zoltan shield in a single volley. Not a lot of ships can do that. And as I said, if you are getting hit in your weapons or you're, you know, potentially taking on damage, that Artemis missile is just kind of there as a really nice safety button. That alone just gives it a whole lot of strength. And also the Artemis lets you potentially go into boarding if you wish. Not normally when I would go with a weapon ship, but yeah. So you have a ship here that doesn't, like I said, doesn't have any flaws other than there's really no systems on it. You're not really going to get crew kills. There's no real blue options available. You can get a Mantis with your humans. The missile weapon hits like 2 or 3 different blue options throughout the game. But it just starts with really solid weapons that are easy to build around, and generally isn't going to just kind of get you killed out of nowhere. Let's see, Kestrel B. So the Kestrel B is kind of in the similar rank. I kind of like it more than the A. It starts with 4 basic laser 1, so it fires 4 projectiles. Another important thing to note is both these ships are actually able to target multiple systems. This is particularly important for ships running away, because you don't want the ships to run away and then alert the flag ships or the pursuing rebel fleet of your location, and they gain a jump. So essentially, you could lose out on scrap, as well as get like stuck in a dive or lose additional scrap because you're going to need to lose a jump. Those things are pretty heinous, again, particularly early on in the game, because you just don't want to lose out on money. It's such a premium because you're making, you know, around 100, 120 scrap a sector in Sector 1 and Sector 2 on average. So what we have here, though, is a ship has a fantastic layout, really strong venting, but again, it's the 4 burst basic lasers. I mean, firing 4 shots is going to shred most ships that you're facing. It's going to do even pretty good damage to Zoltan shields. You'll be able to like target weapons and drone control. You can do, 1 basic laser will take down a shield bubble, and then you can do 2 damage to one of those systems and 1 damage to the other. Or just the overwhelming number of projectiles means it's going to be tough for the RNG of just a lot of dodges to occur. One thing about FTL is that over a run, yes, everything sort of evens out, but it just takes one fight of you're not dodging anything, they're dodging everything, and things can go bad. But when you're firing 4 shots at once, it's less of an issue, as well as the fact that that means it has a level 4 weapon system. Now, the Kestrel A has a level 3 weapon system, and with the Kestrel B's level 4, it's essentially just 35 scrap for free. You just have that upgrade, it's on your ship, and it's ready to go. And people do struggle a little bit with the transition of the ship weapons-wise, because it doesn't feel like you're elevating yourself a whole lot when you pick up new weapons. Like if you get a pike beam, you're like, okay, well, I get this pike beam online, but it's going to slow down my volley. But I think it's a little bit of that's a kind of the wrong way to look at it. It just starts off with like really strong weapons, like they're kind of overpowering. And while some stuff kind of feels more lateral transition than an upward progression, you're still finding better weapons, you're still improving yourself, as well as the fact that every time you're getting a new weapon online, you can just sell one of the basic lasers for 10 scrap. So you have this 35 scrap investment already in your weapons, plus you have 4 10 scrap things that you can sell. Again, it's not a ship that produces a lot of blue options. Your crew is 4 crew, so you can deal with borders very well, including having a Mantis. But Zoltan, Mantis, and humans do not really combine with a lot of blue options. So again, crew kills aren't going to be very prevalent for this ship. It's just that it's going to carry you very easily through the first 2 sectors, and then you can use that time to kind of get your run ahead and dominate the rest of the way. Just be, like I said, with that particular ship, just, you know, if you do come across viable weapons, don't pass on them just because you're getting through sectors 1 and 2 so easily. Like most ships, once you get shields on board, you should be looking for a weapon to get online. That's going to bring us to the Kestrel C. Now, the Kestrel C is definitely less than these 2 ships. It just doesn't have the damage output that the others 2 do. It doesn't have the ability to target 2 different systems, like damage-wise, that these ships have. So yeah, it generally puts it in a lower class. Plus, it only has 2 power in weapons, which is not great. It does start with a dual laser and the ion stunner, which it means it's a little better than these 2 ships in terms of getting crew kills. Either like using the ion stunner to get crew to burn to death on enemy ships, or to stun, say, their oxygen systems until they asphyxiate. And the nice thing about the stunner in that regard is that it doesn't deal damage, so you can have very prolonged fights without having to be concerned about the hull damage. One of the things that tends to mess up crew kills is that the AI, the enemy ships, just kind of like run out of hull as you're damaging their vital systems to try and kill them off. So it struggles there, but as I said, its weapon output is just less than the other 2 ships. And the fact it is only going to be damaging a system at a time, it means it does struggle against ships that are running away. Now, a lot of people can misfire their weapons. It's not just hitting the shields with the ion and hitting them with the dual lasers, but instead, there are a lot of situations where you want the dual lasers to hit shields, and then the dual laser shot to hit weapons, and then the ion shot to follow. And that way, if they get damaged and then get ion, that's 2 different weapons coming offline every single time. Unless they have buffer point weapons, but that's later in the game. But yeah, it has blue options because it actually has a clone bay, as I'll do see layout ships. It has a Lanius on board, which in Lanius sectors has like 9 different blue options. It also has level 2 sensors, which has a lot of similar blue options that you would get with long-range scanners. But again, like the other Kestrel ships, it doesn't have any systems. Well, dual lasers are great. And then you have, like I said, you have these like blue options or the ability to risk crew with your clone bay, saving them in certain events where med bay would not. There's not enough firepower, there's not enough damage output, and you have this 2 power weapon system, which just doesn't feel great to me. So yeah, so it's probably going to be sitting down around here. What ship should be next? All right, the Engi ships. Engi A, which looks a lot like the Engi C. So the Engi A is even going to be lower than this kind of ship. Engi A has a lot of struggles. So one of the things with the Engi A, so the Engi A starts with this Ion Blast Mark II, and a combat drone. So you can't target the systems you want to damage. While you can target the systems with the Ion Mark II, and you should actually target their enemy weapons early on instead of just their shields, and try and keep their weapons suppressed. And then hopefully your drone will just at some point start pouring on the offense and pick them apart. While that's your general going, it doesn't scale very well. Like once you start getting to 2 shielded ships, the ion blast just falls off pretty dramatically. You're gonna need to do what's known as ion stacking, which is stacking up ions fast enough ion damage that it overcomes the damage being ticked off. So every ion damage lasts for 5 seconds. And yeah, the Ion Blast Mark II fires fast enough that even with travel time, that if you're just constantly hitting shields, any shield system will go down. As long as you don't miss, and they don't have cloaking, or they don't hack your weapons, or they don't have a defense 2. And like I said, or dodge a single one of those shots, because that will just instantly break the ioning that you've been building up. The other problem with this ship is that it only has 3 weapon slots. That's a pretty big weakness. One of the benefits of having 4 weapon slots is you can just get more efficient weapons. But you can also kind of slot in like crew kill specialist weapons. Like you can put in a small bomb or a fire beam. You can just have that on your bar and not be reliant on it for killing enemy ships. But just something you can kind of like bring online after you disable their ships and then go about picking apart their crew. 3 weapon slotted ships do not have that as an option. So it can be harder to get the offense going. Furthermore, the Ion Blast Mark II doesn't play well with others. You know, if you want to try and get, say, a Burst 1 online, you have to get to level 5 weapons, and so that's like 85 scrap. Like that's what you spend on a system or a high-end weapon, and you're gonna have to spend that just to get, say, like I said, just to get a Burst 1 online or a Burst 2. Those are just like pretty significant weaknesses in my opinion, that you can't really do damage targeted. You can't hit the systems that you want. I mean, you can still get some crew kills. You can use the drone to suppress shields, hit the ion, hit the O2, and sometimes you can asphyxiate enemy crew. But yeah, this ship is just, it doesn't scale well with what it starts with. You don't want to typically utilize offensive drones because, again, the targeting issue. Those scale awful for the amount of scrap that you have to invest into them. You know, you're losing a drone part every single time you're using a drone. Unless you get recovery arm. But even if you're operating with 2 drones, like drone control is super expensive to level, burning through 2 drones, and really you're just dealing with like maybe 2 shields worth of damage. You know, if you're thinking about it, like if drones were weapons, you're paying 2 power and a drone to be like a basic laser. At least it deals with Zoltan shields early on fairly well. But a lot of hazard events, you know, the drones can actually be benefit from things like asteroids or maybe even pulsars, but it doesn't scale well with a lot of other weapons. It has drone control as your starting system, which is one of the weaker systems. And it just doesn't really, like I said, it doesn't scale as quickly as a lot of other ships do, while also having certain inconsistencies. Next up is, we got the Engi B. Where's the old Engi B? Engi B. Engi B is pretty bottom tier ship. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. The Engi B suffers from a lot of problems. It doesn't have sensors. Not the biggest issue, but it doesn't have sensors. It has level 1 engines. It only has 1 crew. Only ship that has that. It has a drone control system, but it comes with an anti-personnel bot and 2 repair drones, so it's not offense or defense in nature. Essentially, it's just to help balance out the fact that you only have 1 crew. And its starting weapons are actually its biggest problems, though. A lot of that stuff you can deal with. You can deal with the fact that you don't have sensors, whatever. You only have level 1 engines. Engines, I find, are typically really overrated. Most of the time, I don't bother upgrading my engines until, like, Sector 4, maybe on Mantis B. There's just not a particularly relevant system in terms of like what you want to invest with. The issue is, like I said, it is the weapons. And you can even get around with like really good micro that one crew member. But the weapons are a heavy ion and a heavy laser one. While the heavy laser one is fine, it's actually a very awesome weapon. The heavy ion is terrible. It's 2 power to do 2 ion damage, so it's essentially only going to be taking down a singular shield bubble, and takes 13 seconds to fire. Well, in Sectors 1, your enemies are going to have 1 to 3 power in weapons, which means they're going to have the most efficiently weapons in the game. These are your burst 1s, your burst 2s, your flak 1s. Their own heavy lasers. So most enemy ships are going to be firing before you do. And you need both of your shots to land to deal damage. Now, yes, it is true that if your ion hits, you actually have 2 attempts with your heavy laser to get in there to try and disable enemy ships. But it's rough. Like, every dodge is absolutely brutal, particularly early on. Because every time they get a dodge, it's another chance their weapons get another volley over yours. Your weapons can potentially go offline before you can even fire them. And most weapon ships can at least deal with 2 shields. There's 2 exceptions to this. One's the Rock B, and the other is this. Now, the Engi B can deal with 2 shielded ships. It can actually deal damage through 2 shielded ships. It just involves hitting 5 consecutive shots with very tight timing. Yeah, that's kind of the best it can do. So it doesn't scale very well. It has a ton of flaws in it that you have to try and fix in a short period of time. Now, it does have a lot of stuff you can sell. You have 3 drone schematics that possibly sell. You have drone reactor and even the ion blast. So if you're willing to sell like the reactor booster, the ion, and one of the repair bots, that puts you at about 63 scrap. Only 2 scrap short of being able to buy a flak 1. But the ship just doesn't have anything really going for it, except for the fact that it's sitting on a pile of money. And it has a heavy laser. But everything else is pretty much stacked against the ship, so yeah, it's going to be towards the bottom. So the last of the Engi ships is the Engi C, and the Engi C is S tier. Engi C may very well be the very best ship in all of FTL. Let's talk over why the ship is so amazing. So it starts with like a billion drone parts. And it has hacking and drone control. It starts with beam drone, dual lasers, a clone bay, 2 Engis, and a Lanius. So the ship is phenomenal in that you already have 2 of the 3 systems that you're going to pick up. And while drone control is weak, it's still viable. You still have hacking, and hacking is the one system you want on essentially every single run that you have. And you can go ahead and just get cloaking, and you can run away with this ship. A lot of times I've seen this ship win as early as Sector 3. You know, you just find a halberd beam, you find cloaking, and you're just done. You're done. You can just coast essentially the rest of the way and have very little trouble defeating the flagship. It does suffer a little bit from only having 3 weapon slots, but like I said, it does have a ridiculous amount of drone parts. It also has a defense drone scrambler, which you can sell for 40 scrap if you're willing to use the hacking bypass trick, which is the toggling power on and off in your drone, your hacking drone, as it's being targeted by a defense drone. Essentially, the shot will miss because it's anticipating where the drone will be. All drones work that way. You can also toggle off your combat drones if they're being targeted by an anti-drone. Or you didn't like where their shields were and were waiting for a clear window. You can just turn off your drone and wait for it to be where you would like it to be. So, like I said, it starts with this 40 scrap. Blue options, has 2 Engis, has the Lanius. If you go to abandoned sectors early on, you have a clone bay, so you can risk crew a whole bunch. Those early threats, hazard events, like the shield hacking event, you have hacking that can just cancel that out. Against Zoltan shields, you have a dual laser and a beam drone. That's going to eviscerate Zoltan shields very quickly. And again, hacking is really nice against those drone controlled ships. So you have, like, you can take out their biggest threat if you need to. Crew kills are pretty easy to do once you can get to like shields 2, or you're just in a safe spot and you can hack their oxygen. And yeah, like I said, you can also sell like the defense scrambler. You can even sell your beam drone if your offense is better for so, and then just kind of transition into general weapons and the ship just goes. I really haven't talked about it, but as far as like overall win percentages on players I've tracked, which is like myself, Hollow, Far Masala, and Cyber One Billy, Engi C does have the highest win percentage at 120-4. Just ekes out the Lanius B. But yeah, it sits at around 96 win percentage across multiple players. It's just absolutely phenomenal. It doesn't really have any weaknesses, and it just can very easily take over and dominate. About the only time it has problems if you don't find weapons, which, like, yeah, like a lot of ships struggle if you don't find weapons. But even then, you're still probably have your beam drone if you didn't just sell it because you don't like big drones, and you have that dual laser to keep going. Yeah, so it should be fine. Next are the Federation ships. So Federation ships are bad. They're all bad. I don't even know if I actually like them worse than Engi or not. So the first ship, the Federation A, starts with a burst laser too, much like the Kestrel A. But that's it though, weapon-wise, except it has an artillery beam system. It has a very diverse crew with a rocket and Engi with several blue options, but the layout isn't particularly great. People that board into, say, like your sensors aren't a whole lot of fun, but that's not as big of an issue because, like I said, you do have 4 crew, including a Mantis. So dealing with borders typically isn't going to be a problem. The issue is just the starting weapon. While the burst laser 2, like as I had said before, is the best purchasable weapon in the game. If you take 1 damage in your weapons, your offense shuts down. That's it. That's all it takes is 1 damage into your weapons, your offense shuts down. And as I was kind of talking about earlier about the ability to damage multiple systems, you can't. You only have the 1 weapon. It can only target 1 enemy system at a time. So ships running away are very scary because you're trying to be like, well, their weapons are dangerous. I should take those out. But then if it jumps away, I'm going to lose 2 jumps. And at that point in time, the artillery is just going to take too long. Yeah, this ship can struggle a lot. The artillery system is not a good system. It's probably the worst system in the game. As far as, those offensive system, or it's not purchasable, but like drone control and teleporter have such better use. You'd almost rather not have that system, to be honest. But yeah, it just, if ships are dodging, they just have like a little bit of evasion, you're dealing very little damage to them. It's too easy for your weapons to be taken offline, and when that happens, you're just kind of this sitting duck, and it's just really rough for the early sectors. The artillery beam, I essentially don't upgrade that until Sector 8, just because it can be good against the flagship. If you're upgrading it earlier than that, either you just had even the most phenomenal run ever, or you're struggling to just survive. Like you're not finding the weapons that you need to beat ships. Yeah, a lot of people think it's better than, say, like the Kestrel A because it has all the blue options. As I said, blue options are overrated. You give me an Artemis missile that can actually hurt enemy ships. You give me another power in my weapon system that is doing damage, and that is just there. Like that's 35 scrap that's invested in what you want and what you need on your ship from the word jump. Yeah, terrible. So that brings up the Fed B. Fed B is kind of in the same spot. You could argue the Fed B is better than the Fed A, or you could argue it's worse, but they're going to basically sit side by side. So this starts with a dual laser and a Leto missile. It would be better if they had more missiles starting out with. Like, if this ship had 5 more missiles, I think I would more comfortably place it actually ahead of the Federation A. But as far as weaknesses go, again, another 2-power weapon system. That's not particularly great. Your second weapon there is a missile weapon, and again, you don't start with a lot of missiles, so it's very easy to run out. But it does at least target 2 different systems, so you have at least something to do against enemy ships. Plus, the Leto can snipe enemy weapons before they are able to fire, potentially making a lot of really disgusting fights safer. The ship also has one of the worst layouts overall. If you want to vent the forward portion of the ship, you have to vent through your med bay. There's these quad airlocks here. It's not normally what you want to do. And this section of your ship kind of funnels borders into your piloting, which is the place you generally least want enemy crew to be boarding into. It starts with 3 crew. You have, a Slug, a Zoltan, and a human. Slugs do have actually quite a few blue options. They kind of rival Engis in terms of how many they have, and they're, your best pilot because they can't be mind controlled. But also, it's tough to get from one side of the ship to the other. So one of the easiest things that can happen to this ship is you get a fire in your shields, and then you have to try and vent out, and it takes a little while to vent. And then you have to try and run crew all the way down the ship to do repairs, and you're just getting constantly barraged, and your weapons aren't, dealing damage in a way that's able to take other enemy weapons offline. One thing is, because you do have level 2 artery, it is artillery beam. You can, potentially, it's not recommended. You can go into cloaking hacking early, which you should be picking up cloaking hacking anyways, but in lieu of getting weapons, you can just try and get that turtle shell of just hacking enemy weapons, cloaking to offset the cooldown times of the hack, and vice versa, and eventually win fights. But yeah, it doesn't have systems that you like, doesn't really have blue options, doesn't have really crew kill options, terrible layout, weak starting weapons. Which brings us to the last one, the Fed C. Fed C, I have it in my D tier. Some will argue that is better than the other Federation ships. I hate this ship. So the problem with the Federation C is... Oh, because I now started doing it, by the way. The win percentages of the same people put these almost identical. 102 and 17 to 106 and 20, so 85 and 84 win percentage. So the Fed C, which sub 80 win percentage, has a teleporter and artillery, so you're allowed 1 more system. So you cannot get cloaking and hacking, which is, like I said, it's preferred. You don't have any weapons starting out, which has a couple problems with it. One, you don't have a way to interact with enemy medical units, nor a way to interact with their weapons. So if you run into all those garbage ships like Zoltan shields, you have to wait 50 seconds to take it down with your artillery flak. That's terrible if that ship's a threat. If they have drone control and a med bay, it can be just an absolute pain to try and send your 2 boarders over there and punch those systems down. But without having a weapon online, it also means that it comes off the smart targeting that you find in hard mode. So the AI is essentially forced to target your shields as much as it possibly can. Which is your one defense for this ship. It's a lot of early ships are terrible for you. Pirate ships with clone bays are terrifying, particularly, if they have dangerous weapons, because it's just so hard to get the weapons offline on a consistent basis. the strengths of the ship really are auto ships, because you have a clone bay and you have emergency respirators. You can board into auto ships and very safely punch down their weapon systems and get those victories, but that's not going to be a crew kill. You also have a set of Zoltans, which you can use to protect your shields from ion damage, so against ion weapons, which you can run into a couple of those early on. You can be safe in that regard. And, you know, sort of in pulsars, but just aside from having crew kills to generate more money, this ship is really rough. It needs a lot, and it doesn't even have room to get a lot in it. You don't have any weapons. You don't have, like, the systems that you have one system you don't want to reliably use. You can only get another system online. Generally, the strategy with the ship is you upgrade to shields as fast as possible. Like, you get a shields buffer, you get another one in there, and then you just over repair. You're going to take a lot of hits to your hull. It's just sort of matter of fact. That's why I said I can't rate this ship particularly high. There's too many. Where certain of these ships like that, whereas like the Engi C is just like, I don't really care what the AI is throwing at me. Like, I can feel like I can handle that situation. And then there's all those like really gross stuff. Like, this just adds stuff to that, where it's just like, oh, if this is if this ship has like just a flak 1 or a burst 1 or a burst 2 and some other weapon and a medical unit or a clone bay, like, you're just gonna take an absolute beating. And there's just not really anything you can do about it. All right, next to the Zoltan ships. I think this is the Zoltan A. So the Zoltan A goes in A tier. Zoltan A is pretty well beloved. Starts with Zoltan Shield, best augment in the game, that can absorb essentially 5+ damage that the AI has to get through before it can mind control or hack or board your ship without event borders. It even has upgraded doors to help deal with the boarding situation. You start with 3 Zoltans and a halberd beam, as well as a Leto. Now, you only start with 3 power in your weapons, so the Leto isn't online at the start, but at least gives you an option to utilize if you don't find weapons in the early sectors to try and punch down enemy shields to set up for the halberd beam. So as far as weaknesses go, because it already has the 3 power weapons, and while halberd beam is incredibly powerful, it's just going to erase a lot of enemy ships. It does make it a little bit tricky to get another weapon online. If you're like, sort of as we talked with the Engi A, you're gonna have to spend about 85 scrap to get another weapon online. That's like a 2 power weapon to try and set up that halberd beam. Though you can go for hacking early on, and that can serve you to some degree. It does try to force you to only hack shields, which is not ideal, but at least it's a totally viable option. With this ship, I actually don't. A lot of ships I could talk about, like upgrading to shields too. This particular ship, upgrading weapons is honestly the best thing you can do with it as far as first priority, particularly if you see a store really early on in Sector 1, because there's only, there's 1.5 stores in those first civilian sectors, so it's less likely you're going to come across one to try and get value out of it. But Zoltan Shield and a shield bubble will get you through like almost every normal fight. As far as like really nasty fights, getting that Leto online gives you a buffer point in your halberd beam. So those hazard events, asteroids with drone control that just rip apart your Zoltan shield very quickly, and you're potentially going to see some damage to your weapon system. Well, now you're going to have that buffer point sitting there, plus you're going to have that Leto online that can essentially snipe those danger systems for you. And once you just have once you upgrade that system, you're going to just be saving money until you're getting stores in the first 2 sectors. It's very easy to just find a weapon and kind of go, or find a weapon in hacking, and you're pretty well set to fight like the flagship or other dangerous ships. It just has really powerful tools in the Zoltan Shield and the halberd beam, as well as a nice little security blanket in that Leto. I actually think it starts with more Leto missiles, or more missiles, than the Federation B. Doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. but it doesn't, like I said, it just has a lot going for it in terms of Zoltan Shield just covers up a lot of flaws very easily. Next up is the Zoltan B. So the Zoltan B, I feel it has to be downgraded a little bit versus the Zoltan A. So it starts with a 4-power weapon system, which is, again, it's one of 3 ships that does that. Kestrel B, Self B, the other ones. It starts with a 2 ion blast and a pike beam, which is really strong. You can fire off the 2 ion blast towards enemy weapons, take an enemy weapon offline while penetrating in shields, and you can do that immediately, and the pike beam will still charge in time to like zap enemies for full salvo. So the timing all works out. You still have the Zoltan shield protecting you. The issue is while you do have a shield system, it's busted. You don't even have a shield bubble. You have to spend 100 scrap on it. That's a tremendous weakness on this particular ship. So if fights get nasty, and particularly fights in hazard events, you can be in a lot of trouble. Solar flares, for example, are very bad for you because if you don't have a shield bubble up or a Zoltan shield bubble up, it can do 2 damage to your ship as well as start upwards of 6 fires. As long as you have one of those Zoltan shield bubble ticks on or a shield, then it reduces it to a mere 2 fires at most in 1 hull damage. Same thing kind of could happen in asteroid fields where just suddenly an asteroid catches your engine, sets it on fire, and you're just there. You're just sitting there taking a ton of damage. So generally with this particular ship, I just try and get 100 scrap to get that shield bubble online and then start trying to put together systems or weapons to pair with what I have, which are very strong. And sometimes you don't have like any problems, like you don't run into drone control, you don't run into really gross hazards, and it's just pretty smooth sailing. But if things get nasty, it can get very bad very fast. Now, people can also complain about the layout about the ship, because the back half of the ship is doors, like you vent through your doors to vent the other portions of the ship. But it's very small. It's very easy to get your crew member from one side of the ship to the other side of the ship to move the Zoltans around for stealing power. Particularly in the front section. I mean, your weapons, your shields are in pretty close proximity, and those are another of the systems you try and keep online as best you can. Those are going to be the most impacting systems for fights themselves. So has like a lot of good stuff going for it. The 4 weapons, the weapons that they can fire, Zoltan shields. It's just that there can be those pretty nasty fights can be equally nasty. Zoltan B has apparently like a below average record, about 84% on my stats. I think that's more biased towards somebody just kind of lowering it than it having a sort of general issue. I feel like those numbers could be better. All right, and finally in the Zoltan category, we have the Zoltan C. The Zoltan C kind of sits here with the Engi A. The Zoltan C is another drone ship. It's not great. Starts with an ion blast, a charge ion, which by itself with training can stack. So, take down enemy shields. It only costs 2 power, which is nice. I think it can actually have 4 weapon slots versus the Engi A's only 3. The issue is it starts with very minimum reactor, while you do start with 4 Zoltans and a battery. Those reactor for you to buy and upgrade are actually at 30 scrap each, which is a lot of money, particularly in the early sector. As I said, you're only getting about 120 scrap. So you'd have to dedicate, 25% of your scrap that you got in a sector if you just want a reactor upgrade. Drone controls, same problem as the Engi A has. They're unreliable. You're not able to take down enemies very quickly. You're very squishy to borders. You don't have upgraded doors like the Zoltan A has. And while also sort of not having that compact layout that the Zoltan B has. There are pretty decent venting in the front of the ship, but the systems back here, like your shields and engines, are very difficult to vent, as well as, say, your clone bay. One way to kind of help with this is I have a tendency to just start a Zoltan in doors. Just go ahead and put one in doors to deal with boarding, and then you'll move them to your drone control, so you'll be able to fire your drone. You don't want to activate your battery too early. The longer you can delay in activating your battery, the better. You don't want to just like start a fight, turn it on, and start moving crew around, and then it just drops off when you actually need to have that power, when you're just like trying to finish off a ship. And then suddenly the fight goes in a completely different direction. Another thing you can do is also just pull a pilot, where it's like, okay, like whatever dodge isn't as relevant as making sure that my systems are running. Ship I would also recommend go ahead and upgrading. Zoltan shields and the shield bubble itself are pretty solid defensive-wise. So first thing you should do money-wise is just invest in your weapons. Give yourself a buffer point. You just want that ion to stay online because it's offense and defense. It's setting up your beam drone, plus it can take down enemy weapons sometimes. Occasionally you can also get some crew kills. If you're trying to take down enemy O2 with it, you want to do it in a pattern of 3-1-3-1. That way, only one of every 4 shots is being absorbed by an enemy shield. But yeah, the ship can require a ton of micro. Boarding situations can be pretty gross. It's pretty reliant on drone control. So yeah, it kind of is going to get suffered into the below average grouping. All right, next is the Stealth A. Stealth A is A tier. I mean, you can put it anywhere over here. The Stealth A, as far as weakness goes, it doesn't have a shield. That's it. It doesn't have a shield system. It starts with cloaking instead in level 4 engines. So those hazard events can be a little bit gross, but hey, you know what? You have long-range scanners, so you can typically plan your way around those events to avoid them in the early game until you do find your shields. On the other hand, you do have titanium system casing to sell. I honestly don't know why it starts with that. Like, that should be on the Stealth B. But here we are. So you can sell that off to just make up money if you need to. But it starts with dual lasers and a mini beam. And those are both incredibly efficient weapons. The mini beam is able to deal anywhere from 2 to 4 damage on enemy ships. It also has a 10% chance to start a fire per tile, so sometimes it gets you crew kills out of nowhere. So you can just do fun little 3-tile swipes in those 2x2 rooms and have a pretty decent chance that you'll get a blaze going. But those weapons are really efficient. It's very common for this ship that you just like get hacking in a flak 1 and that's it. That's your offense. You're just completely done. As far as upgrading on the ship goes, just get a buffer point in your weapons as soon as possible, and you'll then run until you get to a store, and you can buy your shields to keep you safe. You could buy hacking, because you could just hack enemy weapons and keep them offline, then cloak and alternate between the two, and essentially they won't be able to hurt you outside of like drones. Yeah, like I said, it'll take a little bit getting used to because you're just not used to ships not having shields. But as I said, you get that buffer point in your weapon system, and then you kind of can just go from there. It generates a ton of money because it has long-range scanners. You can die pretty early, and then because you're not going to be investing a lot of money into your weapons, you know, it doesn't really require that much money to win. Actually, this was a ship I used to try and do golf scores with, try and win with the lowest score possible, and I beat the flagship with like a score of like 3,400. Let's Stealth A win percentages. Why do I have 2 Slug A's? That's not. Stealth A is number 3 overall win percentage at just under 94%. So pretty good. All right, then we get down to the Stealth B. Big contrast. Stealth B is by itself. Stealth B is down here. This is actually, you know what? This is not even. This is just Stealth B. Stealth B is by itself. Stealth B, worship in FTL. I don't care if some people find it fun. I'm not rating ships on whether I find them fun or not. I'm rating ships on how good they are. The Stealth B has phenomenal weaknesses. It has no shield system, and it has an incredibly slow firing weapon, the glaive beam, which takes 25 seconds. It has garbage venting because it only has single door airlocks placed on the ship. It has a med bay that you can't really kite into. There are players who have found very specific micros and are actually able to heal like 3 to 4 crew at a time. But this ship makes all ships a threat. Like every ship you're facing is going to be dangerous with this particular vessel. If you're struggling with a ship, you're not alone. I'd recommend watching some Life is a Burrito. Is probably the best Stealth B player in the world. And in hard mode, we do a lot to get that ship to, you know, across that finish line. We do things like we empty out the air so it's below 50% to try to get the AI to target the oxygen. But the thing that's now particular strategy-wise for this ship is utilizing sensors to turn off your weapons. If you do this just at the moment that the enemy weapons fire, it can remove that from the special targeting list and drastically reduces its chances of being targeted. Now if you get boarded into the sensors, or you're in an ions, or you're in a nebula, like that doesn't really help. Drones aren't affected by that, so drones can just take it down anyways. But yeah, drones, particularly Beam 2, Beam 2 will just basically kill you. Beam 2 drone will just absolutely kill you. Mini beams are a total, like the bane of your existence, because mini beams can just clip from cloaking into your weapons, and you know, now you're just struggling to survive for your life. And even if you get the 50 scrap to go ahead and upgrade to level 3 cloaking, and you're just pre-cloaking most fights, you're still susceptible to a couple ion weapons that target your weapons. The enemy ship has cloaking. If the enemy ship has hacking and hacks your weapons, or still drones. Like there's still a lot of ships out there that are very dangerous for you, or if you get forced into a solar flare. This ship just can be an absolute struggle all the way through. It almost never feels safe for me, and yeah, it is the losingest ship in overall win percentage at up just above 50%. Those numbers have risen recently. Like I said, utilizing a lot of those depowering strategies, but it's still far below what other ships in terms of overall records. Then you got the Stealth C. Stealth C kind of goes up here. Has almost the exact same amazing weapons that you find with the Stealth A is, plus has a clone bait, plus a slug and rock for blue options, but you know what I think about blue options. But it doesn't have a shield system, and despite it being a stealth ship, it does not have cloaking. Instead, you have drone control with a modified shield plus drone, which gives you like a Zoltan shield-like effect, essentially allowing you to absorb a single projectile. Yeah, this ship is rough. This ship, things can get out of hand very quickly. It requires a lot of money to get going, because you're going to want to buy shields and you're going to want to buy cloaking. So there's 150 plus 125 scrap. So, you know, just, 275 scrap right there to get systems that you would prefer. Yeah. It's like the fact that it is one of the least defensively sound ships in the game is why it's down here. A lot of ships are a struggle. A lot of ships are a threat. Hazard events, again, are incredibly bad. Zoltan shields can take too long for you to get through. This is another ship like the Stealth A, very similar upgrade in that you're going to want to go ahead and get a buffer point in your weapons, because that's your best thing going for you off the start. is you protect those weapons so that you can just take down enemy weapons, take down the enemy ships, hope to survive till you get to a store. I actually like the Stealth C in so much that it has like some really fun decisions if you get to a store. Like, what happens if you find a weapon, or hacking, or shields, or a defense drone 2? There's a lot of kind of cool choices you can make, which a lot of ships are very sort of linear path, like you're gonna basically fill it out the same way as you normally would. But that doesn't make it consistent, and it's not. Like I said, strong weapons, a couple little blue options here and there, but the defense is just terrible. While you can sell off quite a few items, and don't forget that long-range scanners are in that list. Like, the difference between you and shields is long-range scanners, you should sell long-range scanners 100% of the time. Like, you don't need to worry about avoiding hazards when you actually have a shield bubble. Yeah, but this sits at the second lowest win percentage at around 66%. Next, Rock A! Rock A is also down here. I don't like the Rock A. The Rock A, it starts with 2 missile weapons. You get a hull missile, you get an Artemis. You also have rock plating, which you can sell, and rock crew members do have a lot of loop options, but did I mention that you only have missile weapons? Because you only have missile weapons. So early stores are really important in any run of FTL, but they're especially important for Rock A runs. You're going to want to get a non-missile weapon online or potentially teleporter. I mean, sending 2 rocks over with Artemis support is all right. Excuse me. And your ability to like take down enemies and like get crew kills and hopefully generate some money that way. But yeah, there are runs that you'll just run out of missiles. What are you going to do? Take missile surrender offers if you can, but it's a pretty big detriment because of how expensive missiles are. Trying to get this ship to survive in the early sectors. There are times where it may be recommended to pass fights, even if you can win them. Auto ships are very bad because they don't have any empty rooms. So your whole missile is only going to be doing Artemis damage, rebel riggers or disruptors. A lot of those ships can have completely packed systems, so your whole missile doesn't do anything. Defense drones can really shut you down pretty hard. Borders can be a bit of a problem just because your rocks are really slow to move and deal with anything, or random fires, same issue. Even though rocks do have a slight buff in putting out fires, it just takes them so long to get there. Yeah, this is a ship that just can kind of peter out very early because you just run out of missiles and you didn't find any help in the early stores. At 75%, it's like one of the 4th lowest win percentages. Engi B is the 3rd lowest at around 73%. So yeah, culprits down here. Shouldn't be particularly any surprise. Next, we have the Rock B, and the Rock B for me kind of goes over here. I really don't like the Rock B. I think it's overrated because people think fires are really fun, and I mean, they are fun, I'm not gonna argue that part, but like, it's fires. Like the Engi B, this ship is gonna really struggle on taking down 2 shielded enemy ships, and it's a weapon ship. It doesn't have any alternatives, doesn't have hacking to make up for it or boarding. It just has a firebomb, which the Engis will put out really, really fast. Particularly if there's like a buffer point in their shield system, which can definitely happen. Like, it's not going to burn down in time to set up for your heavy piers. If they're auto ships, it's really unlikely that you're going to be able to damage that second shield bubble. So, like, once you get into Sector 3, like, you need to get some help already. Now, you can have some blue options because you have 4 rock crew, as well as the fact that you are going to get some crew kills, and you really got to maximize those. Like, you should push crew kills. It may be worth trading some hull to just try and find something better to pair with your Pierce. the heavy piers. Also, the ship doesn't start with a door system. So even though you do have 4 rock, borders can be a little bit gross because you can't really control where they go. Doors are like the best way to deal with borders. So not having one, it becomes noticeable. Also, if you tend to like go boarding ships and get clone bay, because you can be very aggressive with clone bay in turn with your boarding, you don't have a way to kill off your crew. Unless you want to firebomb them. You don't have airlocks ever, even if you do get a gore system, so you have no place to vent them out to reset their health. You do have a buffer point starting off in your weapons. It's nice, I guess. So you're able to keep firing your heavy piers, but yeah, it's weak weapons, and it can fall by the wayside without help very quickly, while also still having sort of the door issues. Defensive drone, though, is pretty good for it. It will protect most of your vital systems pretty cleanly, just shields are a little bit suspect. But yeah, it's got to be down here on the list, like just the ineffective weapons. No thank you. Rock C may be like one of the best of the like just not this like A tier kind of list stuff. Rock C has a surprisingly solid record at about 88% win percentage. It's 10th overall, just below the Zoltan A. It has essentially the best layout in the game because you have just tons of double vents, tons of airlocks. You have a clone bay, you have rock for blue options, you have rock plating, which you can sell for a bunch of money. You even have a crystal crew member for lockdown shenanigans. But you have this, the swarm missile setup, because all of them have to have some sort of missile weapon. Swarm missiles are actually pretty good. Swarm missiles, again, I think it's another kind of those weapons that is often overlooked, but it's a 2-power Leto. The ability to just, at 7 seconds, hit enemy weapons before they fire makes fights potentially a lot safer. Plus, you can just sit there and charge it up if they, are thinking about running away, and you fire 3 damage. Essentially, it's a cheaper, slower Hermes missile. That's pretty viable. Plus, it sells for like 32, 35 scrap on top of your rock plating. You can easily just get 70 scrap right there at an early store. And you have that Crystal Heavy. So the Crystal Heavy goes through a single shield and deals 2 damage. So it has 2 buffer points protecting it as well. And that'll work with a lot of different weapons. It doesn't work with beam weapons. Like, beam weapons don't like your piercing weapons. But flak, ion, lasers, and you don't have to spend any scrap to get them online. You just once you buy them, you can put them over the that swarm missile, which again might be worth holding on to. Don't just sell swarm missiles. Don't sell anything just because you kind of don't like it. Sell something because it gets you something better. Yeah, sell something that actually gets you something better than what it is, something that you need right now. Getting rid of I've had runs where, I held on to it and just, I didn't find any weapons for 3-4 sectors afterwards, after finding my initial weapon. Absolutely held a run together. Versus just, selling it because, missile weapons are bad. But yeah, like I said, it's probably one of the more underrated ships in the game, just on that basis of it doesn't seem like it has a whole lot going for it, but it gets there. More times than not. At the rock ships, we got the slugs. All right, we got the Slug A. Slug A is tough. Slug A is kind of on the cusp here in the A tier ships. So what the Slug A has going against it is it only has 2 crew. That's really it. It just has only 2 crew. It has starting weapons at 3 power with dual lasers, an anti-bio beam, and a breach bomb. So when you're in the early going, you're going to want to actually keep your slug crew in weapons. You want those weapons firing as fast as possible. Again, dodge overrated. And if it's like a really disgusting fight, like you're like, oh geez, I just have to get out of here, then you can go ahead and rotate them to engines to help increase your FTL charge time. But like that's it, like 2 crews. So like fires can be really gross, particularly if fires in your weapons or engines or piloting, like those things are a pain to vent. Absolutely. But you have a 3-person med bay, so you can kind of stay there. And this thing just gets crew kills. And really, you're going to be starting off with your breach and dual lasers. And what you want to do is target weapons with both of those. You know, get a damage in, breach them as well, slow down that repairs, then switch over to that bio beam and start just crew killing as much as possible. Also has Slug repair gel, which just easily sells for 30 scrap. You're not going to really use that for anything. And I'm a person who generally keeps the breach bomb. I find it incredibly effective for crew kills or just slowing down repairs, but it deals 30 damage to crew, which is 2 times more than what it should. Most weapons just deal 15 times their base damage. But yeah, I mean, it kills crew, so it generates a bunch of money. The weakness is fires can be bad, but you have the ability to deal with most ships. The weapons can be a little bit wonky because, you know, your anti-bio beam isn't doing actual system damage. You are relying on missiles from your breach. May not be the best. Generally, you just want like more traditional weapon loadouts. But then you have those 2 weapons that you can just sell. So it's like, oh, like I'm gonna get a bunch of crew kills, and then I have 2 sellable weapons plus an augment just to make money. So this ship just like generates so much money for you. It's hard for it to fall behind. Next, Slug B. Slug B is here. Slug B is another one of those ships I think that just gets hated on because it requires so much microing. Like, you gotta really be precise about where you're moving your crew in and out of rooms. There are a lot of fights where your boarders are going to lose. But if you can do that micro, Teleporter, Artemis, and boarding gets the job done. So let's talk about the ship and why it does have weaknesses, though. You are boarding with slugs. Slugs are not your preferred boarders. Mantis, yes. Those are you want. Crystals, phenomenal. But like rocks are okay if you just like, because you can just send them in and they win fights, but they're not mobile. So if you're doing like multiple boarding, they're not particularly good for yakety strats. That's where you just run around the ship and buy time for your other boarders to be able to, for your teleporter to come off cooldown and send other boarders over. As well as the ship doesn't have a medical unit. Doesn't have a med bay, doesn't have a clone bay. Instead, you have a repair bomb. But you do have an Artemis missile. So what you generally want to do is use that repair berm on your ship. That way you can't miss. And if you're going to use it against the enemy ship, try and lower their evasion a lot before it happens. If you move to an adjacent room, like you board into one room and then move into another room, like right next to it, the enemy will switch out its crew. So if you're boarded into like a 3-person ship, one of the crew will leave and the pilot will come down. That would be a perfect opportunity to land your Artemis missiles, or if you need it, your heal burst. It kind of does fill into the same category as the Rock A, where, you know, like missiles are going to be a premium. You're going to be using a lot of them. But like I said, you have this alternative. You do have boarding, you do have crew killing capabilities. In fact, you can, and the medical unit isn't great, but you can sell the healing burst and the slug repair gel and buy it. Like, you can just buy a med bay, or you can buy a clone bay. I prefer a clone bay. I just take whatever as a way to save on weapons. But yeah, you are at a disadvantage in a lot of fights. And so you kind of got to use micro in hopes that eventually you either just survive long enough to get hacking or better boarders. But it's much more manageable. Like, the flaws are under your control. Like, if you do really good micro, if you're moving crew back and forth, you're picking your spots, you know, essentially you just need hacking and you're good for like sector 5. So that's what it has going for it. All right, next, the Mantis ships. Oh, no. Slug C. Slug C. Sorry, Slug C. How could I forget Slug C? Slug C, the player ship. The weakness of the Slug C is just that it starts with chain lasers, which chain lasers are slow, takes 16 seconds to fire, it's only 2 projectiles, so you're only hitting the 1 room. And if you get damage in your weapons, then your offense goes offline. The only real threat against you is Zoltan shields, because you can't MC and you can't hack. Outside of that, you're in the driver's seat. What you're going to do a lot is hack and MC weapons in the early going on. And what that's going to do, there's going to be a crew in that weapon system, and they're going to punch down that weapon system for you before it even has a chance to fire. So every single fight, essentially one of their weapons is going to be disabled, and the hacking is going to double the repair speed it takes to fix it, or sorry, have the repair speed it takes to fix it. So unless they're an Engi, they're taking 25 seconds to fix that thing. And if that's the case, mind control's ready to stop that and just enable a bunch of crew kills. You also sell Slug repair gel. You have upgraded doors and 3 crew. They're all slugs, so you can't be mind controlled. None of your vital systems are going to get MC'd. That you have to worry about it. You also have a clone bay to risk crew. Tons of phenomenal stuff going for it. Like I said, Zoltan shields, they're about the only thing that is gross, but you know, just get up to shields 2 and you're going to be pretty safe, and eventually those crew kills will sort of just foster into you getting free stuff. And you can go from there. Yeah, I definitely like it better than those ships, better than the Kestrel ships, just because it has such an easier time of generating money. Slug C's number 5 at 91 and 67. Slug B is actually pretty low. Slug B is a 78 win percentage ship. It actually is below the Engi A, but again, I think this does take a lot of skill and a lot of expertise to play to its fullest, and it punishes you if you're not doing so. Mantis A, another potentially underrated ship. I don't know. Is it best of the above average ships? Maybe. So Mantis A is going to be the first boarding ship you find generally. It starts with 4 crew and a teleporter with 3 Mantis. An Engi, only 3 weapons. All the slug, I think. Yeah, all the Mantis ships only start with 3 weapon slots. So weakness-wise, what the ship struggles with is just the fact it has a really disgustingly large layout. Like, if you're running from one part of the ship to the other part of the ship, it can take a really long time. If you get hacked anywhere on your ship is just effectively cut off. Like, you're going to have to punch down 2 doors to get anywhere you want to go. Like, engine hack is just one of the worst, where it's just, like I said, like, it essentially just dissects your ship in terms of being able to get from one place to the other. Zoltan shields are pretty disgusting, but it's a boarding ship where you actually do have an answer to auto ships. A lot of boarding ships don't have that. Like, they just can't board into auto ships. They don't have weapons to deal with it. You're fine. You'll eventually bomb their weapons if they're dangerous, and then you're going to bomb their shields and shoot them with your garbage little basic laser. Transitioning to like a general weapon loadout is a little bit tricky though, because you have this small bomb, right? And so if you have a small bomb in one of your 3 weapon slots, having like 2 weapons to hurt enemy ships is like not really a thing in the mid to late game. But it won't typically matter because you're going to be boarding and your Mantis are just going to rip them apart. That same strategy we talked about earlier about like moving to adjacent rooms to pull pilots. Get your small bomb more likely to land. Take out their enemy weapons. Make yourself safe. Yeah, I don't know what issues like people sort of face with this particular ship. I mean, yeah, Zoltan shields are gross early on because it's going to take you too long to get through them, and if you don't have 2 shields, you're in a bad spot. Shield hack event, not great, but because your Mantis are going to win, there's a decent chance your small bomb lands and you're okay. Plus you have an Engi that's going to fix stuff that gets broken. Yeah, the pheromones that sell for 25 scrap. And it generally, like, you just get to 2 shields and you're pretty okay for like 3 sectors. Like, and if you get hacking, you can go even further. And then essentially just like looking for Zoltan shield bypass, or just you just need weapons to get through Zoltan shields, and you're done. Yeah, I could see it being higher tier, but I can't just put all the ships in the higher tier. Next is Mantis B. Mantis B, I kind of want to put it towards here. Mantis B is a ship that I'm learning to be better with. It actually has a surprising low win percentage for being such a favorite. Where's it? I also have a compiled list of ship rankings. Mantis B sits... Yeah, Mantis B sits like 13th because some people really hate it and other people really like it. But the Mantis B win percentage is... that's the Mantis C. Mantis B is, wow, it's like 24th in overall win percentage. So the problem with the Mantis B isn't that you start with 2 shields. It isn't that you start with a bunch of stuff you can sell scrap-wise, you have a bunch of drones, you got 2 systems, you got a 4-person teleporter. It is you have 2 Mantis and they can't fix anything. They can't fix anything, and the front of your ship, like all ships in FTL, there's a blind spot for defense drones. There's a problem with the XY coordinate and how the game sees where your ships are located, so missiles coming from that side of the screen, from your right side of your screen, your ship defense drones really struggle to pick up. And unfortunately, that's where your defense drone and your shield system are. So you have that problem. The other problem is fires. If you get a fire in your door system or your oxygen, or worse, like a breach in your oxygen, you can be in an absolutely awful position in terms of being able to do repairs. Now, recently there was an update. There was like a really, really tight microing you could do in terms of trying to fix your O2. But that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. So what I recommend with that ship is it's a lot of micro, but you actually want to vent that area. You vent your oxygen, you vent your doors, like 0 oxygen in that. And then you want to seal that portion of the ship off and open up the rest of your interior. And that way there's going to be oxygen in your med bay or your teleporter, and you just have your second Mantis, 1 in pilot and 1 up in sensors, so you can kind of see what you're getting yourselves into. Until you can, have somebody that can fix it. Just find another crew. Another crew is your #1 priority. To that end, it's like I said, it's one of the only ship I bother upgrading engines early, because it'll give you the ability to run away from bad fights. Maybe have a clutch dodge here or there, but generally the idea is that you just want to get out of those disgusting fights. Even level 3 engines, it's 25 scrap. It's not that big of an investment to get there. I will totally sell my boarding drone and my pheromones to buy a crew. Yeah, even though that means I won't be able to kill auto ships, because this ship doesn't need a lot of scrap to get going. Then the other thing is some of the boarding ships, like, it has that problem where, like, if you get jammed with like nebula sectors, even though the teleporter has a couple blue options with them, or worse, double abandoned sectors, super rare, I know. What are you gonna do? Like, you're at such a disadvantage at dealing with those particular vessels. Boarding bot can like punch down stuff eventually. But yeah, it's a snowball ship. Like, there's a lot of stuff that can just get you killed in Sector 1. Like, just random stuff happens to O2, starts to double fire, and you're not doing that venting technique. That can just be the run. Burst laser decides to hit your drone control, start a fire, whatever the case, hits you in the shields. A lot of things can kind of randomly just kill you, but with 2 shields, you're pretty safe. With a 4-person teleporter, you can snowball very quickly. Yeah, just you have to be really careful sort of in those like early sectors. So I could see it being higher rated because like people, they can just win. Like, you just get free crew and you go and you're just erasing enemies before they're ever a problem. Or on the flip side, you take a first jump and somehow your oxygen goes down and everything is just awful afterwards. And Mantis C kind of follows the same protocol in terms of it doesn't have that O2 weakness, but what it does have, I'll put it here. Yeah, I still feel like, again, to me, it's more about grouping than like rankings within the group. The Mantis C starts with 3 crew, but no real viable weapons. You have a stun bomb and a lockdown bomb. I'm pretty bad about using my lockdown bomb. I wish I was better about it, but I'm not. You start with a Lanius, a Mantis, and an Engi as your crew. So not really the best group of boarders. You do have a clone bay. So boarding into auto ships is not a problem because you just send your Lania over there and they deal with it. It's other ships that can be potentially gross. Zoltan shields, you're in a bind to survive long enough. You know, your Engi is typically going to be your pilot because you're going to be boarding with the other 2. But what you should be doing is being willing to board with all 3 a lot of the time. So one way to sort of just improve your chances of winning with the Mantis C is rotating your Engi down just before you jump, and then send them to the room below, and just before they enter it, go ahead and move them to sensors. All right. And what that's going to do for you is when you finish on your jump, your Engi is going to be in the sensors, gives you eyes on the ship that you're about to fight. Your Mantis is already sitting in the teleporter waiting, and your Lanius is in the weapons room adjacent, right? And then you can look at what the enemy ship is and determine whether, like, okay, like this is what I need to board with, and move your Engi over there and board with 3 when it would be beneficial to you. And really nasty fights actually kind of want to take Lanius B strats, and I kind of recently picked up doing this myself, is board into shields and then like pull in their crew and then rotate your 2 crew out and start punching down their weapons if they're a threat. And then you can actually send one of your crew that's punching down weapons to the shield room and bring that 3rd crew back. And you have to do it in that order, or the enemy will just completely bail on the shields and flow into weapons. And that can buy you enough time to break the danger weapons and then try to win the fights from there. And you have to be really careful about maintaining your Lanius crew health, and by that I mean like being able to kill them off, because if they're at low health when you're boarding, you're at a massive disadvantage. But again, like Kestrel B, you get some crew on that ship, you get to your 2nd shield bubble, and you can kind of run from there. But there are a lot of ways that your ship can take a bunch of damage from a varied amount of ships. So I feel it's kind of like more on the average, below average kind of ranking. Okay, next we're going into, oh, we're gonna do crystals next? Okay, Kestrel A. Kestrel A should be up here. Kestrel A kind of operates in the same sort of area. Where, like, it just erases the enemy ships for the first 2-3 sectors. Like, you get shields, and that's it. And you're still going to kill every single enemy ship because you have piercing on all your weapons. So even when they have 2 shields, you just hit one. Your crystal burst is going to hit 1 shield, and then it's open for your burst and your crystal heavy. All right, so that's what it has going for it. It has that. It has 4 crew, and you have crystal vengeance, which you should absolutely sell. Sell that garbage. Its weaknesses are that the layout is kind of, it's a massive ship. It's very massive. It's a huge layout. But worse than that is the fact that your weapons are slow. Most of your enemies will get a volley off before you do, and that means that they can potentially take out your weapons before you have a chance to fire. That's where you can run into issues. Zoltan ships kind of have that, where, you know, they're gonna be able to potentially, like, if they have a flak or something disgusting, it's gonna take you a while to get through that bubble. Those are a little bit gross. Those piercing weapons don't play particularly well with beam weapons, so you kind of can't really transition into beam weapon loadouts. but very similar to, you know, what we're talking about, Rock C. Yeah, it's just a better version of Rock C, which normally would seem insulting, but now that we know that Rock C is good. Like, it just has that 2 buffer points protecting its heavy crystal, which is going to kill most enemy ships by yourself. You have a lot of crew to try and actually fix things, even though they're very spaced out. Please put your 2 people in the weapon room, put like 1 in weapons and 1 in doors. It's one of those ships that I've seen people have a tendency not to put 2 crew over there. Crystals are a little bit bad at putting out fires. They have a debuff against them. Not as severe as, say, Mantis, but it's still there. So just have like a human over there and doors chilling out to help put out fires or fix that thing, because, as I said, your weapons are a little bit slow. Kind of has like that Kestrel B issue with transitioning into different weapon loadouts, because, like I said, the Crystal Burst 1 is a pretty rough weapon, because normally you want your burst weapons to like be able to suppress shields, and it can't, because it can never take down that last shield bubble, because it has piercing. Yeah, like that's it. Like, it gets through the first 2 sectors, 3 sectors in fact, pretty easy, pretty handily. That gives you plus having 40 scrap on board for you to sell. It buys you a lot of time to get like what you need to go, and it very rarely struggles. You can go boarding with it. I mean, you do potentially have 2 crystals if you have to go that route, and again, your weapon setup, if you're like moving that pilot in and out or using your lockdowns effectively, you know, I have to finish the thought there. If you're moving the pilot out, your weapons can deal 2 damage through a 3 shielded ship. All right, so that's sectors. That gets you through sector 5 if you want to go the boarding route. Yeah. Crystal B. Crystal B is a ship I have a little. It should be up here. Like, it should be up here, but it also has its faults. I'm gonna put it above. Do I have this alternate? I don't know. Again, more about grouping than tiering. We might move some ships around here. All right. So what the Crystal B does have is 4-person boarding, 3 crystal crews, and cloaking. It's pretty absurd for your systems. Like, you're just looking for hacking as your last system, and you can run. This is the ship that's used for Gulf score runs. If you're trying to beat FTL with the lowest score possible, this is what you want to use, because it takes the least amount of scrap to win. I think the current world record's like 1,600. I've personally beaten the game with a final score of 2,022 using just that ship. Yeah, so like, that's phenomenal. It absolutely snowballs. The problem is it does have some bad matchups early on, and you have to be careful. Of the losses on the Crystal B that we have on, so it is a 114 and 11 ship. 4 of those losses are mine, and they're kind of nitpicky losses. One was my fault, because I just like didn't board with enough crew, and then Crystal Vengeance actually killed one of my own crew. Another time was that the AI just fought against boarders in a really weird way. You do have to be careful of some things. You have no way to deal with Zoltan shields. You can't do it, and you can't kill auto ships. So you can just honestly, the biggest problem is that you can run into a bunch of those, and you don't get enough scrap to get to your second shield, and you just run into something really disgusting. Or you just run into a lot of little disgustings, and they kind of ship and gnaw away at you. Do not hesitate to go to a store, first jump, sell Vengeance, and get yourself a buffer point in the shields. Don't do that. Other problems with the ship is you have 3 airlocks that are all single doors, so the venting is absolutely garbage. It's a massive ship. I recommend actually pre-venting the cloaking system, because if 4 boarders board into there, they'll punch it down unless it's already vented. They will absolutely punch down your cloaking system. And crystals are bad about putting out fires. So sometimes those things can get pretty disgusting. But again, it's okay to miss out on fights. Don't take risks. Hopefully don't get jammed with like an early abandoned sector. I mean, that can kind of work. Remember that your crystal crews take half asphyxiation damage, so you can board into auto ships and at least disable them from being threats. And yeah, just get second shield, prioritize getting another crew, and then it's just trying to crack Zoltan shields and you're done. Yeah, just watch out for pirate ships with phone bay. Seriously, because like those could be a problem. All right, into the Lanius ships. Like Lanius A is just essentially the Slug C. They both have hacking. They both have a chain laser. The difference is this comes with an ion stunner and another upgrade to weapons, where this has mind control. So that gives it at least way better options on dealing with Zoltan shields, because you got that 2 damage ion weapon, plus you have the already built-in buffer to your weapon system. So that's really strong. I don't know inherently why it doesn't get enough love. It has like the 7% percentage, so it should rank up there and be respected. But yeah, it just doesn't enable getting crew kills quite as easily as like that's like C. I mean, that just crew kills if there's no tomorrow. As far as weakness goes, yeah, it has like the level 1 engines. Blue options aren't really there. It's a very big ship, I guess, so you could argue like defensive drone control is not particularly good against it. Fed ships I think are technically worse. Not that you would get it with this ship. You're just going to be hacking weapons early on, and generally goes. I just have bad luck with this ship. I've had some like absolutely rough runs with this ship for just like no reason. That it's just bad runs having to line up with the Engi A. But yeah, it should totally be in the conversation as a top flight ship. And then we have the Lanius B, which should be a no surprise. Lanius B is here. I would put actually just below. Second highest win percentage, 124 and 5. I don't know what weird weaknesses the ship has. It has level 1 engines, I guess. It doesn't have sensors. Who cares? Defensive drones aren't gonna be very good at protecting you. Now, it should be said, you absolutely can die in early sectors. Defense, drone control, which we don't care for as a player. Like those early sectors are just absolutely disgusting because it's just the amount of shield suppression that can go on. So yeah, if you're Lanius B, if you've run Lanius B, you board into shields, you mind control with their crew who lands in shields, then you go over and you punch down their weapons. Repeat, do that over and over again. If your Lanius crew are low on health, kill them. Leave them over on the enemy ship, kite them through a room until they are punched down to death, clone them back, and start again. You want them at maximum health or near to maximum health every single fight. Oh yeah, and then you just have this advanced flak. You just have this like best weapon in the game. 1 power takes down 3 shields just because it can. Sure. You even got emergency respirators. I don't know why, but you do. Sell that off, as well as you have a clone bay I just mentioned, but that allows you to risk crew whatever the heck you want on events, and you got an engine for blue option that fixes everything. Yeah, it's an incredibly efficient ship, very difficult for it to lose. It's a boarding ship that can deal with auto ships, no problem. You send the Lanius in, punch it down, Zoltan shields. I mean, your flak is going to get through Zoltan shields just as fast as about anything that exists in the game. Let's see. Okay, kind of percentage. I feel like this is kind of what the tier list should look like. Ships can kind of move up and down a little bit, or like within their own tiers, but this is generally how I perceive these ships. Like, nothing kills these ships. It's very difficult for these ships to die. My personal record with both of them is like Lanius B, I'm 30-0, Engi C 30-0. 60-0 with both those ships. It's a pretty decent sample size. It's very hard for them to die. Then you're getting into these ships, which again, they have a lot of strong stuff going for them. They generally cruise through the early game. There's a few potential missteps here or there, you know. Like, yeah, sometimes the beam drone just has it out for you. You can't avoid a hazard. Sometimes fires start and you're kind of in a bad spot, but it takes a little bit more than just bad. It takes, like, your run-of-the-mill RNG. Like, it takes a little bit of extra. You kind of have, like, these kind of average ships, and again, some stuff can, like, in this middle, and you're going to move up and down, where, like, they don't have a whole lot going for them, or, their weaknesses are a little bit more apparent. Then, like I say, you have these average ships, which just are, like, it's pretty noticeable what their flaws are. Whereas, like, the weak weapon system, the inability to properly repair or deal with a lot of enemy ships. Again, weak weapon systems, incredibly heavy micro inconsistencies, you know, and then you get into just, like, these absolute dregs, which are, like, these ships are just designed to be struggles from the get-go. And then you have Stealth B. Stealth B is just, it's terrible. So just kind of, I'm going to kind of run through overall win percentages because I kind of skipped over that. And so Engi C, 96%, 96.77. Lanius B, 96.12. Stealth A, 94%. Kestrel A, 93%. Slug C, 91.5%. Kestrel B, 91%. Lanius A, 90%. Win percentage. When I upload this, I'll actually do a link to, like, my stats page, which also has all the rankings as well, in case people don't want to look at that. Slug A, basically 90 win percent. Zoltan A is 89%. C is about 88.5%. Kestrel B is at 87 win percentage. Kestrel A is around 86. FTL A, 86%. Yeah, actually, that's about the same road as the Kestrel A. Yeah, Kestrel A is just, I don't know, feels a little bit down. I'm not sure what numbers were dragging it down. Federation B, about 84%. Zoltan B is at 84%. I think it should be higher. Mantis A at 83.5%. Definitely should be higher, more consistent winning with that particular ship. Then goes to the Kestrel C at the 17th rank at 83%. Slug B, 82%. Engi A at 79%, so now we're below the 81% mark. Slug B at 79% winning. Mantis C is about the same win percentage. Zoltan C is at 78. The 22nd ranking. Fed C at around 77 win percent. Mantis B is at 76.3%. I think, like, a lot of these ships, like, you know, the more you play, your numbers are going to go up, and you figure out, like, solutions to some of these problems that are going to have higher numbers than what they do now. Consistency wise, I have actually phenomenal record with Engi B, for example. I don't like that one. I can't really explain, but it's like on par with, like, my Stealth A for a really long time. Yeah, so Slug A is at 75%, Engi B, there it is, at about 73.5%. Kestrel C instantly drops down to like 66%. And then at the bottom, Stealth B with about 51 win percentage. So yeah, that's kind of just where I see the rankings of the ships. Feel free to, like, argue in the comments. Nicely, though. Don't be mean. Don't be belligerent. It's predominantly opinion-based. Your expectations or your experiences with those ships is going to alter how good or bad you see a particular ship, more so than anything else. And again, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like, you roll a ship, and that's the ship you run with. And how good or bad another ship is not going to affect how you handle a run. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you all for listening, and hope to see you all again soon. Take care.